the other KYC, know your criminal. You have to understand how bad actors think, how they operate, understand their methodologies. And, rather than checking off the know your customer due diligence onboarding checkbox, understand what a criminal would do to circumvent anti-money laundering, the countering of financing of terrorism protocols. Even protocols in your own country, if those who are outside of the United States. You have to be a strong compliance officer. You are the first line of defense. And if you don't understand how a criminal thinks, you're going to miss something because they're pretty smart. And I'll start with Bitzlato. A lot of those in the audience have heard of Bitzlato. They were bad actors. They weren't even hiding. They were hiding in plain sight. For example, I'm a chief compliance officer. I've been doing it for 4 years now in the crypto space. And when I have clients, the first thing I look at is their website. You'd be surprised how many bad actors hide in plain sight. We just don't know what we're looking for in the crypto space. So start with the website. If you worked at Bitzlato and you were the chief compliance officer, or if you were a regulator suspected in investigating Bitzlato, or if you were law enforcement and you got a tip about Bitzlato, do you know what to look for when you go to their website? As a chief compliance officer and a criminal investigator for 100 years, I go to their website. Their website says a lot. A lot of the websites like Bitzlato, they actually advertise no selfie is required. Only required a name and very limited person identifiable information. They're registered in Hong Kong. That was no secret. It just says a lot. And also, as criminal investigators and compliance officers, because this is a compliance force, get used to navigating through the dark web. I always tell my team, of course, never access the dark web from your personal laptop. That's a major no-no. We all know that. But if you have a standalone machine, or if you're working with federal law enforcement or the intelligence communities or a regulator, access the dark web. Go to these dark marketplaces, see what they're advertising. They advertise in plain sight. Bitzlato did it. Bitzlato advertised on the dark web that they engaged in transactions with the Hydra marketplace. That's OFAC sanctioned. For those in the audience who don't know what OFAC is, it's a component of the U.S. Treasury Department of Office of Foreign Assets Control. Come on. They were advertising in plain sight on their dark web. They were advertising in plain sight on their website. So as a compliance officer, think about it. Go to their website, see what they're advertising, and see what's missing, see what's a red flag, indicators. When I get hired as a chief compliance officer, the first thing I go is to check out my client's website. And a lot of the websites, if they don't have, like to the right, is website up to date with legal terms of use, privacy policy, even in section where you can contact them, or a section for law enforcement to contact them. A bad actor, when they create websites like Bitzlato, they don't have any of these things on their website. They don't have contact legal. They don't have terms of use. They don't have privacy policies. They don't have a website link where you can contact law enforcement because they don't want to be contacted. Think about it. And also, which countries are these entities, these startups, these crypto exchanges are advertising their company? Where do they operate? Do they operate in sanctioned countries, in U.S. sanctioned countries? Do they operate in high-risk jurisdictions? Something to think about. And again, Bitzlato advertised in plain sight. I cannot even emphasize that enough. And another thing to look for is compliance officers. When you're working at a crypto exchange or crypto or startup, adverse media. One red indicator that regulators and law enforcement look for is adverse media. Are there a lot of complaints being discussed about this one entity, this startup, this crypto exchange? Because complaints on social media, whether legitimate or not, is an indicator of a weak compliance program or no compliance program. Let me tell you something. I monitor adverse media. And also on open source, of course. You can Google it. You can go on all social platforms like Telegram, LinkedIn, you name it. Social platforms can tell you what is going on with this particular entity. And again, we have to go on. I don't want to beat up Bitzlato too much, but we've all heard about Bitslato, something to think about as compliance officers. Another one, and again, just for the record, these are not my clients, but I've had clients in the past. I have current clients now. I go to their website. A lot of the website, like Mako, for example, which was shut down, to my knowledge, their address or office address was a home address. The phone number, the business number they have on their website is a personal cell phone. The info, I actually sent an email to this info and it bounced. So the website says a lot about an entity. So as compliance officers, look at their website. Plus, copyright 2021, a new startup. A lot of startups, don't get me wrong, not all startups are bad, just for the record, but a lot of startups don't have the money or the resources or the people to help them with their compliance program. That's why a lot of these startups contact our team so we can help them strengthen their compliance program or even build it from the bottom up. Because a lot of these startups, they've been operating for like 2-3 years with zero compliance program. And when I get those calls and those emails, I'm like, are you kidding me? And I actually say that, are you serious? You've been operating for 3 years without a compliance program? And well, they're like, we don't have the resources. I'm like, well, you're in trouble, number one. And two, with compliance, yes, it can get expensive because we're considered overhead. And I get it. Everybody out there who has a startup wants to make money. They need revenue. That I understand. But without a compliance program and without a strong compliance program, I promise you right now, law enforcement will shut you down before regulators do. As a chief compliance officer and a criminal investigator in the crypto ecosystem, law enforcement scares me more than regulators because law enforcement works faster. They know what to look for. They're more trained. And they'll shut you down before regulators. Just something to think about. So if you think you haven't gotten caught yet, you're going to get caught. I promise you. Especially if anybody who's on this call. And another thing, you have to teach. A lot of these startups, they don't understand where to even start. So, it's our job to help them build a compliance program. You have to remember, in the crypto ecosystem, the compliance program is different than a traditional compliance program. Not 100% different, but just a little bit different because the thresholds are different. In the traditional world, your transaction thresholds may be more the over 3,000. It's a red flag or it triggers a bell. But in the crypto ecosystem, threshold is 1,000 and over. So you have to remember, if you have a compliance background right now, but not a crypto compliance background, you have to remember that traditional compliance threshold is different than crypto compliance threshold. Just something to think about, especially when you have clients who are registered in the United States as a money service business, but they operate outside the United States. So you have to keep up with not only if you're in the U.S. policies and procedures, U.S. laws and regulations, AML, CFT protocols in the United States, then you have to maintain and keep up with what's going on, where your client is operating in, like in Europe or the Middle East or Asia, Africa especially. I have stories to tell you about Africa when I was a chief compliance officer and my client was operating in Africa, and I learned a lot about culture and a lot about African laws, rules, and regulations, something I'm going to talk about as we move on. Okay, let's go here. FTX. I'm not even going to waste a lot of time on this. Everybody in this in the audience, I'm sure, has heard of FTX. It's so funny. It's not listed here because there's too many red flags to list about FTX. But who knew that the CEO of FTX was rooming with other executive officers in the Bahamas? Who rooms with their CEO? Who's a roommate with their CEO? I mean, that's definitely a red flag to me because there's a conflict of interest. Speaking of senior executives, perfect example. I had a client who was a CEO of a startup outside the U.S. in Europe, and his best friend was general counsel. So as a chief compliance officer, as a chief crypto investigator, I have to report to the CEO and the general counsel counsel on a daily basis, letting them know this is what's happening, this is what needs to get done. And if the general counsel disagreed with me, the CEO disagreed with me. And I said to the CEO, there's a conflict of interest. You guys should not be best friends because you're subjective and not objective. And my job is to keep you out of the news. My job is to keep you out of jail. Food for thought. Think about it. Call me back. So they rectified that. So another thing, executive officers, are they related? Are they rooming together like they are in the Bahamas? The FTX people in the Bahamas, it was like a joke. It was like a reality TV show. And so anyway, something to think about executives when you are a chief compliance officer at a startup. Do they live together? Are they dating? Something to think about. So FTX is a great case. I'm not going to beat it to death. Everybody's read about it. With FTX, one last thing. I mentioned adverse media. CoinDesk, from what I can remember, produced an open source report on Binance liquidating FTT tokens, and the rest is history. So again, have your compliance officers, your social media directors, monitor social media and adverse media. Something to think about. This is my favorite. We're going to spend a lot of time here. Crypto financial crimes. For those in the audience who have a background in financial crimes investigations, great. Bring that tradition, bring that knowledge, bring that experience, and apply it in the crypto ecosystem. But there's one catch. I'm a firm believer, if you don't have a crypto background, you're a compliance officer or some entity, you need to understand, again, you don't have to have a strong crypto background, but you need to understand what a crypto address type looks like and the differences are. Perfect example. When I had an investigation that lasted about 6 months to a year, we had 10 people on the case, and we realized that bad actors are actually exploiting customer service representatives who don't have a crypto background, who don't know the difference between a Bitcoin, Monero, and Ethereum, Litecoin, Dogecoin, etc., don't understand that the first few characters of a public key that's listed here, red and green and blue, is an indicator of what type of coin it is. So we found that the bad actors are calling customer service reps. Not only do they open legitimate accounts with legitimate person-identifiable information, they make deposits in their wallet. I'll give you a perfect example. This is what this bad actor did. She deposited $1,000 or $100 worth of Bitcoin, $100 worth of Binance or USDC, any other coin, only $100, only 100 US dollars. Call the customer service rep and say, hey, there's a problem. I made a mistake. I have 2 accounts with you. I have 2 wallets with this company. I made a mistake and transferred 100 blah, blah, blah to this wallet. I need it transferred to the other wallet. And the customer service rep said, oh, not a problem. How much was it? The bad actor, rather than being honest and say $100 worth of whatever coin, said to the customer service rep, it was $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, which was a lie. But that customer service rep didn't know the difference between, a Dogecoin, a Binance coin, or Bitcoin. And that rep transferred, because all about customer service is keeping the customer happy, is transferred $1,000 worth of Bitcoin into that bad actor's wallet. And believe it or not, bad actors, they communicate on social media, Reddit, Telegram, Discord, you name it. And once the word is out that they can exploit customer service rep, they do it. And then if the customer service rep is smart enough to realize that this bad actor is lying or trying to manipulate them, the bad actor is literally on social media complaining about this startup, complaining that this customer service rep is not refunding them, this customer service rep is not nice. Bottom line, vilifying this customer service rep to the point where the customer service reps are pressured into giving in and transferring the exceeding amount to the bad actor's, another bad actor's wallet. It's ridiculous. So hopefully I did not confuse anyone out there. Bottom line, bad actors are exploiting social media, exploiting customer service rep, hoping that customer service rep don't know the difference between a Bitcoin, Monero, and Ethereum, and they take advantage of that. And that's fraud. That's bottom line fraud. So that's something to think about. So I'm a firm believer if you are a compliance officer, chief compliance officer in an entity, a startup, anywhere, or even a chief investigator or legal, train everyone in your compliance department. Everyone. Because compliance is the first line of defense. Once that first line of defense is broken, then your platform is vulnerable. It's going to be exploited to bad actors. Bad actors start creating ghost accounts and funnel accounts and move crypto, mixing crypto and so forth. I'm not going to get into mixing and tumblers and shape shifts on crypto. That's another day, another story for another day. But train everyone in your company, train everyone in your compliance department. Even if your company or organization doesn't offer products and services in crypto, it doesn't matter. You need to understand what crypto is and how it can be exploited and moved and used to launder money, used to commit fraud, and used to finance terrorist operations. Something to think about. Oh, last but not least, the last bullet, understanding the crypto market value. CoinMarketCap and Messari, as compliance officers and as investigators, use CoinMarketCap and Messari to identify the value of that coin. Because a lot of bad actors saying, hey, I bought Bitcoin on this day, 2 weeks later, they want the Bitcoin drop, the value drop, but they want what they paid for. So understand the market value before you start refunding and transferring funds over what that bad actor has paid for. Then again, don't get me wrong. You don't have to be an expert in crypto, but understand what address types are and what they look like. It's just something to think about. Okay. I'm sure those in the audience have heard of pig butchering. I'm not going to beat that up to death, but another financial crimes involving crypto. Again, social engineering, romance scams. These bad actors are in social media exploiting, defrauding innocent people who don't understand the crypto ecosystem. Something to think about. Rug pulling. This is something new in the crypto world. A lot of bad actors are claiming to build a startup and bring in investors. And then when the investors deposit their investment, the bad actor runs with it and disappears. To make a long story short, you can all Google these terms. I'm not going to waste any time today discussing rug pulling investment schemes. Something to think about. And again, for those who don't have a crypto background, if you are in security, if you're a securities compliance officer or you're a securities investigator, you can apply your knowledge and experience into the crypto ecosystem. So anyone in the audience who has a securities background, rug pulling, we need people like you to help us investigate rug pulling, wash trading, and pump and dump schemes in the crypto ecosystem. Money mules, very traditional term. Those in the audience know what money mules are. They're basically legitimate people using legitimate IDs, legitimate people using their own legitimate IDs to open accounts, and also could be bad actors who steal legitimate IDs, legitimate person identifiable information to open accounts. Or a money mule can also be bad actors hiring people who have legitimate credentials to open accounts on their behalf. Money mules are being used a lot with crypto, especially using Bitcoin ATMs, automatic teller machines. Those are huge, especially outside the U.S. Inside the U.S., majority of the BTMs that the money mules use, a lot of the BTMs have cameras, and sometimes we find out in the field that cameras are disabled, but money mules are used mostly at BTMs or CTMs. We've noticed a lot of BTMs and CTMs near universities outside the United States because it's easy to exploit a student who needs the funds for school, university, tuition, and bad actors hire students to use them as money mules to move money using BTMs and CTMs throughout the world. It's sad, but it's true. And, I've noticed when we were out in the field overseas, a lot of BTMs are on ships because there's online gambling. A lot of BTMs and CTMs are in coffee shops, at the malls, at the train stations. This is outside the United States. Even at the airport. So if you're ever flying outside the U.S., walk through. I promise you, you're going to at least see 10, 20 BTM machines, well, depending on the country you're in. So money mules are huge in the crypto ecosystem because bad actors use them to use them at the big BTMs and the CTMs. Because again, a lot of BTMs and CTMs have cameras, and the bad actors don't want to be seen, so they hire students who probably don't have criminal backgrounds to move money on their behalf, move crypto, purchase crypto on their behalf. Cyber attacks, ransomware is huge throughout the world. I currently have a client in the U.S. government, and that's my number one job, is to trace crypto involving ransomware. So cyber attacks, people in compliance world, work with your cyber team. Make sure your compliance policies are up to date. Make sure ISOs are up to date. I don't have a cyber background, but you know where I'm going with this. Cyber team, compliance, and cyber always work together. You have to always work together. I'm going to talk about collaboration efforts between compliance and cyber team, legal team, and country managers as we continue with this presentation. Okay. What triggers an investigation? Okay, a lot. And again, I want you as compliance officers to think like a bad actor. Know your criminal. I want you to understand how they operate. I want you to understand their methodologies. I want you to understand how they circumvent AML CFT protocols. And I get it. You're not going to understand this by reading books or going to webinars like this. So that's why I want you to collaborate with investigators. As a lead person in a startup, as a chief compliance officer, as a chief investigator, I always make sure that compliance officers are working with investigators. When I joined the compliance world in 2020, believe it or not, my contact at the Treasury Department, who knew me at CIA, called me. She's like, "Hey, I understand you want to leave you want to leave government, go into the private sector to do crypto, but we need a compliance officer." I'm like, "I'm not a compliance officer. I'm an investigator. I'm an intelligence officer. I'm a field agent. What do I do with compliance?" And she goes, "I want you to teach compliance officers to think like a criminal. Hence, know your criminal." So she hired me, and I literally joined their compliance team. They had no idea what to do with me. And I trained every compliance officer. I'm like, "Look, these are how bad actors are moving money. This is how they speak. This is the type of buzzwords they use, codes. These are platforms they're exploiting. These are their methodologies, and so forth." And I'm like, "I promise you this is what they're doing, because I've been out in the field for over 20 years. I've targeted them, I've followed them, I've interviewed them, and I read about them." So that's how I learned. And I brought all my skill set, of course, the unclassified version, and brought it to the compliance department and say, "Hey, compliance officers, this is the other KYC, know your criminal. You need to think like a criminal to stop them, because compliance, they're the first line of defense. Once that defense is broken, the platform is vulnerable and it can be exploited easily. And once you're reactive, it's very hard in the crypto ecosystem to stop the money flow in the crypto ecosystem, especially if you don't have trained people. So yeah, what triggers an investigation? The compliance department, transaction monitoring, everybody listed here, internal sources, everyone here, and this is a very short list, can trigger an investigation. Even if you don't think it's nothing, even if you don't think it's an investigation, bring it to your leader. Let them make that decision. Let them teach you, this is a possible case, and this is why. So don't assume because you don't have the investigative experience or the field experience or experience as an intelligence officer, it doesn't mean that you cannot trigger an investigation. Go with your gut feeling and bring your skill set and your experience. you know, to your leaders, say, hey, I suspect something, and let your leaders make that decision. But don't walk away from your leaders. Let your leaders teach you. That's what I do. When I have a junior person come to me, or even an experienced person come to me who don't have a strong crypto background, I teach them. That's my job as a leader, because I teach them. They can go back to their offices, their teams, and teach them and make your fortress strong, because compliance, you're the first line of defense. I cannot emphasize that enough. Again, investigators, compliance officers always work with investigators. As a leader, I make it mandatory for my investigators and my compliance officers to work together. I make it mandatory for the investigations team and the compliance team to be in one room, one department, one floor, because I want everybody to talk to each other. After COVID, we went back to our offices. I want everybody in this, near the same cubicles, because I want people to hear how they're talking. Buzzwords. I mean, that's how you learn. That's how I learned about compliance. I sat in the compliance department for about 6 months. I'm like, oh, this is compliance. Got it. Because I heard the buzzwords. And then I taught them how investigators think, how investigators act, how investigators build cases. So again, today I'm not going to talk about how to build a case, because that's another story for another day, another course on building crypto investigations. Legal team, always get legal involved. Always protect yourself. I never triggered an investigation. I never activated an investigation until I talked to legal. I use my experience. I bring the person who brought this matter to my attention. Legal, because it protects you. When I left the federal government, the U.S. federal government, I didn't know anything about professional liability insurance. So working with legal in the private sector taught me a lot about that. So those in the audience, if you're in the private sector, you don't have professional liability insurance, you should look into that. And I know the CTEC, the crypto CFOs, had a recorded course on crypto and insurance. Getting insurance in the crypto ecosystem. I highly recommend that to protect yourself. Transaction monitoring is a plus. It's a must, I should say. I train compliance officers what to look for in buzzwords. But I'll give you an example. When I was doing transaction monitoring in the compliance department, I'm like, why does this one customer have 5 accounts with 5 different addresses, same phone number, same name, same identification to open the account, but 5 different addresses and 5 different accounts on the same platform? And he wasn't even corporate. I thought maybe it was a business account. This was a 25-year-old young man in one of the African countries. And I'm like, wait a minute. Why does this 25-year-old profile has 5 accounts, with 5 different addresses and so forth, but doesn't have a business profile? In the compliance world, for those experienced compliance officers here, there's a personal profile and a business profile. And if your transactions don't match your personal profile or your business profile, that's a red flag. Bells will go off. So when I thought I was going to trigger an investigation, this is where I learned about culture. So I immediately froze his accounts, all 5 of them. Now, for those out there, when you freeze accounts in the compliance world, when you freeze accounts in investigations world, especially in the crypto ecosystem, you have to move fast. Because once you freeze that account, that user is going to wonder, why is my account frozen? And then we have to play games with that person, that user, say, oh, sorry, we're having technical difficulties. We have to move fast, which in the crypto world is not easy because there's a lot to understand. But again, that's about building criminal investigations. So come to find out, this young person, 25 years old, in this African country, was an agent. Agent meaning he was like a hawala. He was an elder in his village who collected all the money from the villagers, put it in all his 5 accounts, and paid their bills for them. I thought this guy was hustling. I'm a New Yorker. I'm like, this guy's hustling. I learned very quickly, culture kicked in. It's legal in that African country. It's legal in that village, because being a hawala, a walader, is legal. And for those out there who don't know what a Hawala is, you can Google it. It's Hawala. It's basically a person who collects funds within a village, pays their bills, and moves money on their behalf. If that village, that geographical area does not have a bank, does not have infrastructure, or they don't have smartphones to move money. Again, okay, external sources. Anonymous tip. I'm a firm believer. Every organization, I don't care who you are, has to have a tip line. You have to. Because a lot of the investigations that I've worked on in my career is based on a tip. And of course, you have to vet that tip, the source and so forth and so forth. You just can't take that person's word for it. Cybersecurity. I'm a firm believer. You working with cybersecurity, it's a must. You have to work with cybersecurity team. External sources, law enforcement. Like I mentioned previously, if your client's website doesn't have a law enforcement link, you're in trouble. You're already in compliance violation. Because every entity, every startup, every organization must have a law enforcement link. You click on that link on the website. This is, like, for example, I'm FBI. I'll click on the link because I need some information from your company. So I'll go to your website. I'll click on my law enforcement link. Hi, I'm Lourdes Miranda with the FBI, blah, 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 blah. Here's some information I need. Guess what? I have a subpoena, I have a court order, whatever. When I support small startups, if they don't have that link, that's something we work on immediately, because that's an indicator that a bad actor could be hiding. A bad actor wouldn't want to be contacted by law enforcement. Something to think about. Regulators to the right. Right now, I'm responsible for reviewing SARs that's submitted to Treasury Department. Is submitted, from Treasury Department goes to the FBI and so forth. So SARs is a trigger for an investigation. Something to think about. Okay, I'm gonna spend a lot of time here. Global Financial Intelligence Units. This is major, major, major in compliance, in investigations, in intelligence collection, and analysis. It doesn't matter. In the crypto ecosystem, it's global, people. You know this. You can't just know United States' FIU, FinCEN. No, you have to understand the other FinCENs in the world. You can go to the Egmont Group's website, Egmont, EGMONT. The Egmont Group has a list of all the FIUs that are members throughout the world. The United States is a member. I brought this up because working the crypto ecosystem, I have clients who operate outside the U.S. They're registered in the United States with FinCEN as a money service business. They're also registered as a crypto exchange in the United States, but they offer services and products outside the U.S. Now, as the compliance officer, as an investigator, if I suspect something while I'm conducting transaction monitoring, my customer has an account based in the United States because he or she lives in the United States, which is fine, less legitimate, but they're transferring funds outside the U.S. I suspect something for whatever reason. I need to contact someone in that country. Who do you contact? You don't know if you don't have that experience. That's what the financial intelligence units are there for. You need to know the financial intelligence units in the world, in the country, in the jurisdiction where your client is operating, where your client's offering goods and services, products and services. That's a must. I had suspicious activity going from the U.S., going to the UK, and I already have contacts in the UK financial intelligence unit. I emailed them saying, hey, I have some suspicious activity. Can we talk about this? It could be nothing, but you never know, because maybe the UK has an investigation on him that I don't know about. They're not going to tell me, but you never know. You have to understand how financial intelligence units work. You have to, go to their website. If you don't have a contact at an FIU, go to their website. There's contact us. So it's something to think about. So every time I have a client that operates outside the U.S. in the crypto ecosystem, guess what I do? I go to every country's FIU. I go to the Egmont Group's website to see if that country is a member. of the FIU. And if they're not a member of the FIU, as a compliance officer, I'm going to flag that geographical area is high risk. Because if you're not a member of the FIU, I question why aren't you? So it's something to think about. 15 more minutes. Ooh, I'm going to be here a while. The 3 tiers. I promise you we're almost done. The 3 tiers I mentioned, collaboration is everything. Everything, everything, everything. Compliance, when you're building a crypto compliance program, compliance is the first line of defense. I cannot emphasize that enough because you're the first contact. You're the one, your team, your group, yourself is the one that's either onboarding that client, that customer who just opened an account, and you're the one vetting the information that they provided so they can have an account open. I can't emphasize that enough. If you miss something because you don't understand the crypto ecosystem or you don't understand the buzzwords, you got to onboard that person who could likely be a bad actor. When I was a chief compliance officer at the startup, I sat in the compliance division for 6 months because I wanted to see how they were interacting with onboarding, the process. And I was shocked to find that many never asked for ID. Even when they asked for ID, when a customer wanted to open an account with that entity, they only asked for the front of ID. Are you kidding me? You got to ask for the front and the back of the ID. You'd be surprised that there's a lot of information as compliance officers in the crypto ecosystem that the back of ID can tell you a lot. Because a lot of bad actors steal ID. They alter it. They only have the front, but they don't have the back. Collect passports. I'm a firm believer of collecting passports because you want to, even though the person lives in the U.S., but they could be a citizen of another country. They could be in the U.S. going to school. They could be in the U.S. Working on a work visa. Passports tell you a lot, absolutely a lot. And again, yes, I understand people have dual citizenship, but as a compliance officer, I always ask for the passport. I don't want your driver's license. I don't want your school ID. I don't want your work ID. I want your passport because your passport tells a lot. Yes, sometimes I get pushed back, but as a compliance officer, you have the power and the control to push back yourself. Would you want a person on your platform who's not cooperating with compliance? Not me. There's a billion people in the world. Why are you going to fight with this person? I always ask for passport. Front, back, maybe a couple of pages if I suspect something. Customer support. I was shocked how many times that I met with customer support who worked for a crypto entity who did not understand the differences between the public keys. Monero, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin, Ethereum. They didn't understand. So we had to train them. Not only we had to train them, customer support, we also had to train them how to review and vet public keys on blockchain analytics. Didn't even know what that was. And I asked, are you kidding me? Customer support? They're the ones to answer questions and complaints. They have to understand. So I had a lot of my junior compliance officers and investigators join customer support team, and they work together and train each other. As a leader, I'm all for mandatory rotations. I have people from tier 1 do a rotation in tier 2 for 3 months and so forth. Because if we don't understand how each other's working, we're going to miss something. Something's going to drop. I cannot emphasize that enough. And I wanted to mention the other teams. The other teams, very, very important. In the crypto compliance world, you have to remember that traditional compliance is so different than crypto compliance. Thresholds are different. Risks are different because crypto is so global. So when I met with the other teams, like country managers, I hired country managers, especially if I had a client who is registered in the United States as a money service business with FinCEN, United States Financial Intelligence Unit, but they offer products and services in Africa, Europe, Asia. So I made sure that me in the United States as a chief compliance officer hired a money laundering reporting officer in those countries. A chief compliance officer in the U.S. cannot be a chief compliance officer outside the U.S. That is a major violation. If anybody ever tells you that, have them call me. because I'll tell them you're going down. You must have a money laundering reporting officer outside the U.S. I only have jurisdiction in the U.S. So when I get hired as a chief compliance officer, as a consultant, my second question is, who are your money laundering reporting officers in these countries that you're offering crypto products and services? Half the time, they're like, we don't. I'm like, you know what? My first job is to hire people there, because as a chief compliance officer based in the U.S., as a U.S. citizen, I cannot be a compliance officer, a chief compliance officer in those countries outside the U.S. That's not happening. And again, if anybody says otherwise, have them call me, because that's ridiculous. Major compliance violation. And then I hire country managers. I'm in the United States. I don't know what's happening in those African countries. I hire country managers to report to me once a week, email, Zoom calls, Google Meets, whatever, to let me know what the central banks in those countries are talking about when it comes to crypto. For example, I had in Nigeria, the Central Bank of Nigeria banned crypto. And unfortunately, my clients, majority of the crypto customers were based in Nigeria. The CEO called me screaming, not at me. He was just panicked. He's like, what do we do? I'm going to lose half my customers because the Central Bank of Nigeria banned crypto. This was a couple of years ago. I'm sure that's changed today. And I said, we can circumvent that. He goes, well, what do you mean? That's a violation. He goes, how are you telling me that you're a chief compliance officer in the United States? So, well, Nigeria has BTMs. And I read the letter from the Central Bank of Nigeria, it's on their website. And it said that Nigerians cannot use banks in Nigeria to purchase crypto. But they never said that our customers can withdraw Naira, cash, from their Nigerian banks, walk to a BTM and purchase crypto. That's what the Central Bank of Nigeria missed. But that's how you legally circumvent protocols. And again, I'm not a bad actor. I'm not suggesting to break the law, but the Central Bank of Nigeria failed to write that. And the CEO is happy. He's like, oh my God, thank goodness. And again, bad actors think that way too. Bad actors are like, okay, you ban crypto, fine. We have legitimate accounts, withdraw cash. Cash is still key as of today. Go to a BTM and, engage in nefarious activities, standing in front of the BTM with a coffee. That's easy. That's not breaking the law. The check. This is a famous check. I can't take full credit for it. When I was at CIA, their cyber team, they're the ones that taught me about crypto. And let me tell you something, people, that scared the hell out of me, because they brought me on board. It's like, hey, Lourdes, we know you have this follow the money background. We know you don't have a cyber background, but we need you. I'm like, sure, I can help you follow the money. I can help you launder money. I can help you, hide money. And they're like, yeah, but it's crypto. I'm like, what? And when they showed me, I'm like, WTF. And I wasn't thinking Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I'm like, what is this? It was like elf language. So it took us a couple of weeks. I'm like, just speak to me in English. What is the mission? And I'm going to put it in layman terms. And I pulled out this check literally from my wallet. I'm like, tell me about crypto using this check. And the rest is history. Okay. Yes, report writing. This is the last one, people, because I know we're running out of time. Very, very, very important. You have to understand the buzzwords in the crypto world to write complete reports. Because I review SARs for federal agencies. And STR, suspicious transaction reports, are outside the U.S. The U.S., we call them SARs. In the U.S., we call them ROIs and RFIs. I read those. So people, please, if you suspect a crypto investigation, suspect crypto illicit activity, you got to know the buzzwords. For example, what to include in reports. If you don't have it, that's fine. But I understand, because I've drafted SARs myself in the Treasury Department. When you draft a SAR, there's limited character. I get that. But, we need amounts. If you have a public key, that'll be the first thing you enter. We need those public keys. Even if you have a partial public key, I know a platform that recovers full public keys by just a partial public key. And again, I'm not going to beat myself to death with this or beat you to death with this, but no acronyms, please. Oh my goodness, no. Investigators Compliance officers, we do not write in acronyms. I'll give you a perfect example. I had a junior investigator come to me and a compliance officer come to me, to my office, and say, hey, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, who's your source? Because I've learned out in the field, source is everything. I'm like, who's your source? Before you even speak to me, who's your source? And the gentleman said, IG. And I was like, what? Inspector General's office? He's like, no, Instagram. I'm like, what? And in my mind, his head exploded. He saw my reaction. He fled out my office. I ran after him. I'm like, what did I say? We never speak in acronyms, because a one acronym like Instagram, God forbid, will break a case. So if you can take anything away from today's presentation, spell out everything. And if you come to me with information and your source is Instagram, you and I are going to have a talk. Key takeaways. I cannot emphasize enough. Number one, the other KYC. Think like a bad actor. Know your criminal. Work with investigators. Take investigative classes. Go online, take investigations. A good compliance officer thinks like the criminal investigator. A good criminal investigator thinks like a compliance officer. We rely on you, compliance people, as the first line of defense. And if you drop that ball, then we're all in trouble. You never, ever want an incident to turn into an investigation, because once it turns into an investigation, your platform is vulnerable. And then the rest is history.